had to make a decision at the end of the day. I had 2 trips to make to the van. Do I leave my better books in the convention room or in an unlocked van on streets of Manhattan?
In my last video with Vincent Zurzolo, co-founder of Metropolis Comics and ComicConnect, he flexed and showed off incredible original art and comic books, including this book. It sold for almost $2 million, by the way. In this video, we'll explore some more humbling moments in his journey, including his most valuable comic books being stolen. He'll also hit upon psychics, what it's like to be on TV, and the one book he would take with him if he decided to live in a monastery. Let's start on a high note. Vincent, what's the top highlight of your career?
I think one of the biggest highlights for me was the sale of the first $1 million comic book. Yeah, so the first $1 million comic book was an Action Comics #1 CGC graded 8.0. And what was even more interesting is after I sold that book, a client of ours, and it hit the news, a client of ours said, well, I would love to have bought that. Do you have anything for me? And we went out and found another copy and sold that one for 1.5 million like a month later. When I was younger, I used to envision like whatever I would do in life, I wanted something that maybe I was the first, or something that, would be remembered. So, you have to understand, coming from the background that I grew up in comic books. I grew up in a middle-class family in Rockaway Beach, Queens, New York. And then I started buying and selling comic books when I was around 15 years old. And I had a partner who had some money, and we were able to buy some Golden Age. But later on, when I just did it on my own through college, I was buying and selling, modern to Silver Age collectibles, as whatever I could get my hands on. And when I graduated from St. John's University, I was actually selling comic books on the streets of Manhattan. So building my business from that, level, where I remember setting up a convention selling dollar comic books, all day long, to build it up slowly over time, and then to be able to not only sell a $1 million comic book, but then multiple comic books for 7 figures over the last, 15 years now, 14 years. It's been really wonderful for me. And that's probably one of the biggest highlights.
Vincent, when I think about you as being sort of the face of the hobby. So what have you learned about being effective in that kind of medium? Because I can't imagine that you were awesome the first time you were ever on TV.
Why not? So for me, I remember being in elementary school when you had to do how-to reports, or reports where you had to get in front of the class. And what they would do is, like, the 5 people who were going would have to stand outside, and one at a time they'd come in and they'd give their presentation. And I remember being really nervous about that. And then one day, I was probably in 3rd or 4th grade. One day I said, wait, why are any of these people better than me? I can do this. And I'm going to do a great job at this. So when I walked into the classroom and I stood behind the podium, the first thing I did is I walked up and I smacked the podium with my foot, and everybody in the class jumped up to at attention, and I got their attention, and I'd start my speech. So I think by the time I also through college and things like that, and also I've been buying and selling since I'm 15. So I used to be at conventions. I used to talk to people all the time. So by the time I got to a place where I was on TV a lot, there were moments where I'd get very nervous beforehand. But the thing is, once I'm on camera, I feel very comfortable, and I love it, and it's really important to me. I want to represent our community in a very positive and professional manner. One of the things I'll never forget, one of my first interviews was on Fox Business, and the day before they were telling me I was going to be in a roundtable discussion, and at that point in my life, I hadn't really heard that description before. I don't know. I said, "What's that?" So, well, we're going to have some other experts there, and we're going to talk about investing. And I was like, "Comic investors, experts?" And they're like, "No, different types." And I'm like, I said, "Okay, you guys aren't going to make me look like, like an idiot or anything." And they're like, "No, no, no, we want you to look great." And immediately my spider sense started tingling, and I was like, I better be prepared for whatever is going to come my way. And sure enough, they had 2 guys from Wall Street who were shitting all over, collective comic book investing. And one guy said, I wouldn't know the difference between Captain Crunch and Captain America. How the heck could I invest in comic books? And I tore these guys apart, like point by point that they made. I said, well, in that case, I shouldn't be investing in stocks because how would I know the difference between this stock and this stock? You do your research, just like anywhere else. You do your research and you learn about things. And they were like, well, how could I beat this guy? I was like, well, then how could I beat a stockbroker? I mean, what you're saying doesn't make sense. Anything you're going to say about this, I can make a statement into about stocks that are 10 times more salient because you're dealing with people who are billionaires, just left and right. So after the interview, the two guys came over to me and were like, wow, you were really good. I was like, thanks, man. It's like, it was really nice that they acknowledged that I kind of defended I did defend our hobby.
What was a tough lesson you learned early on in the comic book business, and how have you adjusted from that experience?
Can you be more specific? I've gone through my fair share of trials and tribulations.
Well, what's something that like it bugged you for a long time, or maybe it still bugs you, right? It's one of those things that you're like, you change the way that you think about how you conduct business, or something to be aware of that you're like, oh, that taught me an important lesson and I'm never going to make that mistake again.
Well, I can tell you that, and I think it was 1996. I was at a comic book convention, and I had been borrowing a friend's van that they had no locks on it. He owned a junkyard, and I had to make a decision at the end of the day. I had two trips to make to the van. Do I leave my better books in the convention room or in an unlocked van on streets of Manhattan? I left them in the convention room, asked somebody to watch them. They didn't. They had their back to them when they came up, and they were gone. My four best boxes of books, and it was heartbreaking. I had no insurance. It was April 2nd. I remember I thought somebody was playing a cruel April Fool's joke on me, and it was brutal. For about a month, I was very despondent and depressed. And then one day I woke up and I said, well, if I keep acting like this, then they'll really have stolen something from me. So I vowed, it was like one of those moments in the movie, I vow from this day forward, I will work 10 times smarter, harder, faster than I ever thought humanly possible. And these were words that really went through my head. And within 3 months, I was back at break even. I paid off consignors whose books I had at the time. And from that point on, I think I had insurance. So that was a learning lesson. So I would say, make sure not only that you have insurance, but that you have it on the locations you're at, and it covers you at conventions and things like that. So, yeah.
Can you remember some of the books that were stolen?
Yeah. I remember there's a Western collection I bought literally the night before. I hadn't even sent the check out. It was $1,800. And every single book got stolen. I remember there being a 1950s Ghost Rider #1 in there. I remember high grade Fantastic Four, early Fantastic Fours, Avengers, Tales of Suspense. There were definitely Golden Age books in there. I will tell you a funny side note story. So at the time, I was after the theft, I was dating this girl in Brooklyn. We went on one date, I think. And I told her what had happened. She said, I go to a psychic who's actually legit. He helps the police. And I was like, I'll try anything. So I went to the psychic and I started telling him everything that had happened. I brought a few comic books that hadn't gotten stolen that were from one of the collections. And he sure enough told me the first letter of the name of the person he thought did it, which I won't get into, who I think ended up being the person who actually did steal them. But later on in the conversation, I said to him, I said, I'm just curious. I recently invested in a movie. How much money did I invest? And he goes, I see the number 2. And sure enough, it was a very small amount of money at the time. It was $2,000. I was like, I could have picked any number. And he said 2. So I was like, wow, this is really interesting. And I said, he said, I said to him, at this point in my life, I was thinking, do I pursue maybe going into a different career? Maybe I like the idea of becoming an actor. So what about, should I pursue acting or should I stick with comic books? No. Stick with comic books. Stick with comic books. And I got like this, I just got this shiver up and down. And he goes, do you want to know what I see? And I was like, nope, don't tell me anything. He's like, there are going to be some big things happening for you in comic books. And I was just like, wow. I wish I would have had him write it down and sealed it, and then 20 years later opened up that envelope. But I didn't think to do that at the time. But it really scared me a little bit. But at the same time, it was like kind of in a weird way reinforcing what my real passion was.
Well, thank God for Daniel Day-Lewis. I mean, we might not know who that guy is today if Vincent went into showbiz. So let's move from Vincent as the comic book entrepreneur to Vincent as the comic book enthusiast. First question, what are your 5 favorite covers?
Venus 19, Wolverine 67, Marvel 2-in-1 number 5, Famous Funnies 215. More left. Favorite cover. Silver Surfer number 4. How's that? That's a kind of a usual one.
Here's also a tough one. So if you decided to become a monk and had to abandon all worldly possessions except for one comic book in your personal collection, which comic would you take to the monastery?
Is it one issue or one series?
One issue.
Huh. What am I going to do with it?
Yeah, that's your only worldly possession
From my personal collection?
from your personal collection. Yep.
All right, it's my Amazing Fantasy 15 CGC graded 9.4. And why? Because if I ever leave the monastery, I now have a chunk of change to start my life back up again. And because Spider-Man is my favorite character, and yeah, that would be it.
That's your backup plan if the whole monk thing doesn't work out.
Yeah, exactly. Boom.
Cheers.
Cheers.
Remember that Tech 27? That's part of a larger video where Vincent shows off some incredible books and original art. I hope you check it out. Thanks so much for watching, and I hope to see you around real soon.